On this Friday night, the urgent race to strike a trade deal with the U.S.
We face higher tariffs than Russia.
How talks are going and the sticking points. Guilty plea. Why Luigi Mangione says he shot this health insurance executive. The potential punishment. Grapes of wrath. The latest setback for BC's already struggling wine industry.
We have friends lost their livelihoods out of this.
And the wide-ranging ripple effects. Chain reaction. Why Ontario's premier now has the power to remove some Toronto bike lanes. And sexy stories.
So addicting.
The Winnipeg author getting people all over the globe hot and bothered.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. With just 2 business days to go until the imposition of punishing new 50% tariffs on Canadian goods, talks to avoid them are going into overtime. Canada's premiers and members of the Prime Minister's Advisory Committee were briefed by our negotiators today, with discussions expected to continue ahead of Wednesday's deadline. Our Mackenzie Gray has been working the phones to get the latest on where things stand. Mackenzie.
Despite a week of negotiations in Washington, Colleen, Canada and the U.S. are not close on a trade deal, with sources with direct knowledge of negotiations telling Global News there's a big gap between both sides on finding a deal to reduce current tariffs and avoid new ones coming into place on August 19th. Despite the distance, multiple sources labeled the talks as positive, with negotiators on both sides, quote, nerding out and reviewing individual tariffs on a line-by-line basis. This backs up public comments by top U.S. negotiator Jackson Proskow on Friday, who said Canada was being constructive, but also that the Americans would not stand for any retaliation that Canada has made. A red line for the Americans? U.S. booze must go back on provincial liquor store shelves. Some premiers are open to that if they get relief for their key sectors, which for BC is the lumber industry.
We face higher tariffs than Russia. The U.S., for some inexplicable reason, is putting forest families out of work here in order to prioritize lumber imports from Europe and Russia.
But 2 sources with knowledge of the talks say the Americans are not interested in reducing softwood lumber tariffs and duties, currently sitting at close to 45%. One source saying Canada has had to fight to even put forestry as a topic of negotiation. Steel, aluminum and autos, the other key sectors Canada is looking for tariff relief on, but multiple sources say the U.S. will not sign any deal that won't have some level of tariffs on those sectors, including a proposal to apply between 10 to 15% tariff on Canadian free trade compliant autos and parts. The U.S. is also seeking a change to current quota allotments for U.S. dairy that can be sold into Canada tariff-free. Concessions Canada seems likely they will have to give up to avoid $28 billion in new tariffs.
It was harder for smaller and medium enterprise businesses to absorb such shocks and such massive shocks. So it will be devastating.
While the Canadian government is willing to walk away from any deal, it is the preference of the Prime Minister to find an agreement now to avoid new tariffs, with a source telling Global News he's taking multiple calls a day with Canadian negotiators while on vacation in Italy. But so far it seems there's no deal for either Mark Carney or Donald Trump to actually approve, Colleen.
Mackenzie, the U.S. president has been imposing tariffs to try to convince manufacturers to move to the U.S. And today, the head of Unifor warned Stellantis may shutter an auto plant in Brampton. What can you tell us about that?
It certainly would be another blow to the auto industry in southwestern Ontario, with the head of Unifor, which is the country's largest private sector union, giving a stark warning.
On Wednesday of this week, a union received information from Stellantis that it is now seriously considering the closure and sale of the Brampton assembly plant.
The plant had been retooling to build the Jeep Compass, but 10 months ago, Stellantis announced that they were moving that production to Illinois and didn't announce a replacement vehicle. Stellantis and the federal government telling Global News they're focused on trying to find a solution at the Brampton plant, but so far no details on who the potential buyer could be. Unifor also outlining that if the Canadian government accepts tariff on CUSMA-compliant cars and parts, which would likely be a part of any deal if it happens, it would be the equivalent, in their words, of selling out the auto industry, Colleen, adding there would likely be more plant closures like in Brampton.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. In a U.S. federal court today, 28-year-old Luigi Mangione admitted to the high-profile killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside a Manhattan hotel almost 2 years ago. Mangione pleaded guilty to 2 federal charges for the crime as he spoke for the first time about his reasons for the shooting. As Jackson Proskow explains, Mangione's admission could garner some legal advantage for his sentencing.
Wearing a prison jumpsuit, Luigi Mangione pleaded guilty, admitting for the first time that he shot and killed health insurance executive Brian Thompson in 2024. "I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan," Mangione told the court. "I knew what I was doing was illegal."
He believed that the system had failed him and destroyed his life.
After enduring years of severe back pain from an injury, the 28-year-old said he began stalking the United Healthcare CEO. He told the court he 3D printed the gun used in the murder and posed as a billionaire investor over email to learn the location of a corporate event Thompson was attending.
The result achieved today now allows our office to seek the maximum penalty allowed, life imprisonment.
Thompson's family called the guilty plea an important step toward justice. The plea avoids a federal trial. And because murder and weapons charges had previously been tossed out, Mangione will not face the death penalty. A state-level murder case may also be dropped because of double jeopardy.
If the defense is able to get Luigi Mangione out of federal prison in his 50s and get the state case dismissed entirely, that will be an absolute home run for the defense.
Yet Mangione's cult following seems unlikely to disappear.
And the insult to the intelligence of the American people.
His arrest after a 5-day manhunt saw him become a social media star, propelled by supporters frustrated with America's costly healthcare system.
And to those who idolize Luigi Mangione, I say this: violence is not a cause, murder is not a message, and a killer is certainly not a hero.
That killer will be sentenced in December for the vigilante murder that shocked the world and divided America. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
In BC's Okanagan region, nearly 10,000 people displaced by 2 wildfires are being allowed to return home. Many live in communities surrounding Summerland, where thousands of people remain displaced, as BC's Premier warns there may be significant infrastructure damage.
Summerland's water supply almost certainly has taken a significant hit. There's infrastructure implications of a fire of this scale.
David Eby didn't elaborate on the damage, and officials still haven't given any estimates of how many homes were lost in the wildfires. For wineries in BC's Okanagan, these latest fires come after years of difficulties, from smoke taint to a sudden deep freeze. As Sarah McDonald reports, vintners have faced challenge after challenge.
The tables are set, but nobody's here.
It's terrible. It's really terrible.
Poplar Grove Winery in Penticton typically has hundreds of customers sipping its Pinots and Merlots every day. But this week...
Really, since 2020, everyone's been going through it, but yeah, there really hasn't been a break.
The Baldrage wildfire delivering the knockout blow of a 1-2-3 punch for world-renowned wineries in the Okanagan. From the pandemic to a scorching heat dome to a deep freeze that devastated crops years later.
We are in 2026, and yeah, it's tough.
24 of the province's 300 wineries hit hard by closures forced by out-of-control wildfire. Most of the vineyards thought to have survived the flames, but...
If a crop is burned, that's just not the grapes we're disposing of for 1 year. That means that we don't have to replant. And those vines can take 2, 3, 4, 5 years before they come back online and be productive. So we don't know the full economic fallout of this yet.
And Jeff Guignard, president of the province's Wine Growers Association, says it could be a while yet before anyone does. Questions still lingering over the impact of smoke on the grapes.
We still have to send in teams to do testing and send in viticulturalists. There's a whole scientific process that needs to be followed so we can ascertain that.
And the status of the workers who pick and process them.
Well, their employment is tied to that specific vineyard, as well as their accommodation. So if they lose those, then it compromises their immigration status.
That's an issue impacting the region's entire agriculture industry, which is synonymous with Summerland itself.
It's an agricultural town, right? And Unfortunately, the fire has hit hardest in those agricultural areas.
And just like getting any good vintage from vine to bottle, the road to recovery from yet another major setback for the sector will be a long game.
We're making the best of it, but yeah, I would say highs and lows.
And for Holler, who's also housing evacuees who've lost everything, there's no time for sour grapes. Sarah McDonald, Global News, Penticton, BC.
The Ontario government has scored a major legal victory in the battle over bike lanes in downtown Toronto. Ontario's Court of Appeal has ruled that removing protected bike lanes does not violate charter rights. The decision clears the way for the province to get rid of them. Premier Doug Ford says it would help improve traffic congestion. But as Sean O'Shea reports, not everyone agrees it's worth it.
Today's decision is an unfortunate setback.
A decision affecting some of Toronto's controversial protected bike lanes, loved by some, loathed by others. And now 19 kilometers of those bike lanes running along some of the city's key corridors can be removed.
We know that decisions come in losses and wins, and so this is a loss, and it hurts a bit today.
This isn't an idle thing with no consequences. People do die as a result of bad transportation policy or frankly the lack of bike lanes.
A panel of 3 judges of the Ontario Court of Appeal has struck down a lower court ruling preventing the Ontario government from touching the lanes, something Premier Doug Ford wanted, claiming they add to gridlock. A judge in the first case ruled removing the lanes would be unconstitutional, but the upper court wrote, "There is no charter right to bicycle lanes, neither specifically nor as inference from any of the rights specifically enumerated in the charter. The existence of bicycle lanes depends on legislation alone." On social media, the Premier wrote, "Common sense wins." Critics disagree.
If the bike lanes are taken out, it'll mean more people will end up in the emergency room in pain or in the morgue because they've been hit, injured or killed by a vehicle.
I think it's crazy, absolutely crazy. That we're having to debate bike lanes in 2026. Like, what other world-class city is debating bike lanes? The debate's over. They make sense.
Over many years, Toronto City councillors have voted to add more bike lanes, including the ones on the chopping block the province wants gone.
Safe infrastructure that we have keeps people alive, keeps people safe. So it's really disheartening to read this decision and know that perhaps things are going to get a bit more dangerous out there.
For thousands who bike in Toronto daily and use the lanes, this court decision hits close to home.
People are going to continue to cycle because they need to, but they just won't be safe if there's no bike lane.
As for what happens to these bike lanes now, that's still an open question because the group that brought the original legal action says it may seek leave to appeal this latest ruling to the Supreme Court of Canada. Colleen.
Sean O'Shea in Toronto. Thanks, Sean. The results are in. Coming up, how the Reform UK leader fared in a by-election against a man dressed as a garbage can. Canada has announced new sanctions targeting 5 senior Iranian officials for obstructing the Strait of Hormuz. It comes as the United Arab Emirates accuses Iran of attacking 2 of its ships passing through the waterway. Traffic in the strait, which a fifth of the world's oil supply passes through, has plummeted as the U.S. and Iran have failed to reach an agreement to reopen the waterway. The U.S. has threatened to step up economic pressure on Iran to force them back to negotiations. Israeli troops still haven't moved a group of Jewish settlers away from 3 Palestinian houses the settlers have besieged since Sunday. The U.S. ambassador to Israel has called the settlers terrorists, despite the Trump administration generally supporting Israel's settlement policy. Since the start of the war in Gaza, Israel has ramped up its building of settlements and its tolerance of settler outposts across the West Bank, all of which are illegal under international law. The United Nations says it has recorded an average of 6 settler attacks per day this year, the most of any year on record. Redmond Shannon reports on the tense standoff that shows no sign of ending.
Human rights activists, many of whom are Jewish Israelis, head to help the besieged Palestinian families. But they are stopped by Israeli soldiers.
The surreal reality is that the army has let settler terrorists go wild in this area, take over houses, injure people, stop their livelihoods.
A group of Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank have besieged 3 homes since Sunday, cutting off electricity and water.
People on both sides have forgotten the humanity of the other, whether it's Hamas, who killed innocent people on October 7th, and now the settlers who are attacking these innocent families here, Palestinian families.
Israel's military has increased troop levels and soldiers have dismantled tents, but they have not removed the settlers, and some were seen praying with them earlier in the week. Even the pro-settlement US ambassador to Israel is calling the settlers terrorists.
He thinks settler attacks on the Palestinians is doing Israel no credit in the international community and makes it harder for the present Israeli government to achieve its long-term objectives.
Canadian Michael Link is a former UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories.
And this village, I've got to say, is emblematic of the rest of the West Bank in terms of these kinds of attacks.
The UN says settler violence is at an all-time high. On Friday, armed settlers confronted Palestinian landowners in another West Bank village. But the methods of displacement aren't all violent. These settlers are accused of diverting water from Palestinian farms to fill a swimming pool. This man says they're here with a divine commandment. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In the UK, Nigel Farage has regained his seat in Parliament, easily beating dozens of fringe candidates, including Count Binface, an opponent who dressed as a trash can. Farage, the leader of the populist Reform UK party, won 63% of the vote. The widely mocked special election was boycotted by mainstream parties, which called it a farce. Farage triggered the vote when he abruptly quit his seat in July after being accused of failing to declare a $9 million gift from a crypto billionaire. Ahead, the heist and now the recovery of millions in stolen masterpieces in Italy. Will there or won't there be a new agreement on hydroelectricity between Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador? Reports suggest we could see one as early as next week. But no matter what's in the Memorandum of Understanding, there's pressure to nail down a binding contract before a potential change in government in Quebec. Heidi Petracek reports on what could complicate matters.
The prospect of a new hydroelectric deal between Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec has been a political promise in Canada's easternmost province for decades and remains a big question mark.
Maybe the agreement is better now that Tony Wakeham has extended it this long. But now the real question is, can we really get a deal done?
Newfoundland and Labrador's PC government decided to renegotiate a memorandum of understanding inked by the Liberals in 2024, one meant to replace the controversial 1969 Churchill Falls contract, which sold kilowatt hours to Quebec for a fraction of a cent. This week, La Presse reported Quebec and Newfoundland have reached that new agreement, citing confidential sources. We will make this information available when an agreement has been signed, is all Quebec's premier said Thursday. Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Tony Wakeham's office added significant progress had been made, but as of right now, no final deal has been signed.
The MOU is an MOU and it's not binding. And it's not going to be legally binding before the Quebec election. And so this thing isn't quite in the bag.
Even if details of a potential agreement are announced next week, October's Quebec election adds a wild card.
That makes it more complicated because the Parti Québécois might say, yeah, we're ripping this up as soon as we come in.
This could be a sort of a Groundhog Day where we do the same thing again and we do the same thing again.
Factor in Wakeham's 2025 election promise to put any deal to a referendum.
First thing I need to do is get a deal.
And calls for details and debate from all sides are piling up.
I really want to be able to question, and that's a question, and that's why I'm looking for a special sitting at the House of Assembly to be able to do this.
Din isn't optimistic that will happen in the time that's left. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Italian police say they've recovered 3 paintings by French masters Cézanne, Renoir, and Matisse that were stolen from a museum near the northern city of Parma in March. Police released video of the theft that was executed in less than 3 minutes. Art experts say the works are estimated to be worth more than $14 million Canadian. Heating up the north. Next, the romance fantasy stories by a Manitoba writer that have fans and even celebrities excited. Nisha J. Tuli is one of the world's breakout authors in the genre of romantic fantasy. Her series Artifacts of Uranus became a massive hit on social media, with the first entry selling more than 1 million copies. And now her dystopian romance novel Stormbreaker has been optioned for development as a TV series. All of this accomplished from her Winnipeg living room turned office. Melissa Ridgen met up with the best-selling author.
I nod and head for the exit, totally not noticing how he smells like an addictive combination of fresh air and wood smoke, conjuring up images of log chopping, flexing forearms, and swelling biceps.
Nisha J. Tuli knows steamy romance.
I can't help the involuntary shiver that follows his gaze. Wow, he's hot. It was just that summer of COVID, and we were all 2020, and we were home, and my kids didn't have activities, and my husband wasn't traveling, and I was reading a lot because there wasn't really much else to do, and I sort of stumbled into some romantasy books.
A subgenre where romance drives the plot of a fantasy world.
I'd written like professionally for years, but I had never really done much fiction, and it was always something I wanted to do. And I discovered romantasy, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to write. And like it just sort of all clicked. So like that summer, I sat down and wrote my first book.
She self-published Trial of the Sun Queen, which went viral on TikTok, the first of a 4-book series, Artifacts of Uranus.
First, for the books that lived up to the hype, we have Trial of the Sun Queen, the first book of the Artifacts of Uranus series by Nisha J. Tuli. I see so much love around this series, and it is so deserved.
Suddenly, Tuli had a cult following that includes actor Katherine Heigl.
So excited to start this. I just finished The Trials of the Sun Queen. So good. So addicting. I can't put them down.
She had read the first book, but she had the third book in her hand. And so like I went on TikTok and I was like, I'm so glad you're enjoying it. Like I'm losing my mind. I'm like, but you bought the third book, not the second book. And she like responded to me, and I'm like, just me and my bestie Catherine having a little chat. This is my home office that used to be my living room but has been converted.
Tuli retired from her marketing career to be a full-time author in her living room turned office, where she's been writing and writing. Good news for her fans desperate for fall reads.
I mentioned the dystopian romance that came out earlier this year in May. The second book comes out in September, Stormcaller, so that will be the next one. This will be a trilogy, so that'll be end on another cliffhanger. And then I've got Too Cold for Comfort, which is actually set in Churchill, Manitoba. I'm fairly sure it's the only romance that has ever been set in Churchill. A moment later, I feel my bag being lifted, and I turn around to find Reed swinging it over one of his rather nicely curved shoulders.
Nothing like a hot romance to stay warm in the subarctic. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Good for her. That is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is this famous gaggle of geese from Sullivan's Pond in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, crossing the street. Don't worry, drivers stopped and waited patiently for the flock to make it to the other side. 7 of the geese were born in May, and look how far they've come. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a good night.